A bunch of monsters. I want to see them all fried. Bold and direct statements in the case of a child, now a man, held captive for 20 years. This is a story that is shocking, infuriating, and heartbreaking, and we're learning more about the family of the 32-year-old man who at the time of his rescue in Connecticut weighed less than 70 pounds. We're on the case presented by Law & Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. We're not only hearing from the biological mom of a man who was rescued from a house of horrors in Waterbury, Connecticut, we're also reportedly hearing from his half-sister. Both say they looked for him for years, and now they're also shedding light on the woman who is accused of holding him captive for 2 decades. Before we get started, though, I do want to remind you of a new project that we're launching here at Law & Crime called Scandal. It's a new YouTube channel that's dedicated to exposing the dark side of fame, and if you can guess by the name, we'll be covering all the wild and disturbing crimes that happen behind closed doors in Hollywood. If that sounds like something up your alley, click the link in the description now and subscribe to our new channel today to stay up to date on all the latest scandals.
Oh my God. It's 2 Blake Street.
What's the address?
Please hurry. It's 2 Blake Street. There's a fire.
That's the voice of Kimberly Sullivan on February 17th. Here's her mugshot. She's the stepmom of the man allegedly held captive in her home for 20 years. I'm going to tell you what the alleged victim's biological mom and sister are saying about her and what police uncovered in just a moment. But let's break down a story that at this point it is still so hard to come to grips with. Sullivan calling police that night because there was a fire in her home.
Who else is in the house? Who else is in here?
My stepson is in here.
How many other people?
Help him out.
Listen,
That's it. I have 2 cats.
Everybody's out?
Yes.
But your stepson's still inside?
Yeah, he's right here.
Okay,
yes.
come out.
Now, as you watch that body cam video, even though she may sound like she cares in the slightest about her stepson, who was still inside the house as it was being filled with smoke, what authorities found when they got inside the home, who they found, has led Sullivan to be facing some serious charges and allegations. And based on the comments from our previous story on this case, she frankly may be one of the most hated people in America right now. Even veteran law enforcement are having a hard time understanding the extent to the brutality that Sullivan is accused of doing. Here's what Waterbury's police chief said in a news conference. This video is from WVIT.
33 years of law enforcement, this is the worst treatment of humanity that I've ever witnessed, right? I mean, honestly, when we first started talking about it, we really couldn't believe it. It took a lot of convincing amongst ourselves to just really accept what was going on, and it's really hard to talk about still. I mean, it's shuddering to think that someone would treat any person, let alone a family member or someone that was entrusted as a guardian or a parental figure in this way.
Police have not identified the 32-year-old survivor by name. In court documents, he's referred to as male victim 1 or MV1. According to the affidavit, the male victim told police he was pulled out of public school in 2004. That's when he would have been around 12 years old. And when asked about his earliest memories, MV1 said that he would sneak out of his room at night to eat and drink. And when it was discovered that he was doing that, he was locked in his room, and he recalled having to drink from a toilet because he was only getting 2 cups of water a day. Over the years, he was let out of his room less and less. MV1 said that he'd have to go to the bathroom in a bottle or a newspaper. He says that his life was so restricted that he relied on listening to NASCAR and University of Connecticut basketball on a radio near his room to know what year it was. Think about that. He was set free by the fire that his stepmom called authorities about, and he told police that he set the fire. He used a lighter, a hand sanitizer, and printer paper. Here's the moment that firefighters took him from the house.
Got one victim right here. I need you to stay over here.
MV1 said that even though his stepmom was telling him to get up and get out of the house, he laid on the floor as the home was being filled with smoke because he knew if he did that, he says, firefighters would have to be the ones to save him and pull him out. He told detectives that he started the fire because, quote, I wanted my freedom. MV1 is now recovering in a hospital, and Kimberly Sullivan is facing serious charges, but there are also a lot of questions about how this situation allegedly happened. Local media in Connecticut has tracked down MV1's biological mom. She lives in Meriden, which is about 20 minutes from Waterbury. Thanks to Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring today's Law & Crime YouTube Takeover. Morgan & Morgan is a law firm with more than 1,000 attorneys, and they win a lot. Here's just some of the victories they've had in the past few months. They secured $9.3 million in a verdict for a car crash in Florida, $5.6 million for another verdict. This was for a car accident victim in Atlanta, and $1.8 million in Kentucky. And in that case, the insurance company was only going to offer $5,000. So even if you don't think your case is worth millions of dollars, why not fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy to file a claim. You can do it with just 8 easy clicks on your phone. So if you're injured and you need to file a claim, go to forthepeople.com/YouTube Takeover to get it started today. She told WFSB TV that she gave up custody to MV1 when he was young to her ex-husband, and local media has identified him as Craig Sullivan. The mom says that she did it for personal reasons. It's unclear what those were. Here's the statement that she sent to the TV station, quote, 32 years ago, due to personal reasons and for the full benefit of my son, I made the gut-wrenching decision to give full custody to my ex-husband. This was the most painful, emotional decision any mother can make, but I thought he would have a better life. In retrospect, this did not come to pass. For the last 30 years, my family and I have searched for him to reconnect, only to be turned away and shut out. The last few days have been so shocking, disturbing, and disgusting to seem true. I hope and pray we can all begin to heal and helping my son to lead a full, happy, loving life. I know deep in my heart, I have always been there for him and always will. Please grant us the time, peace, and respect as we try to cope with this tragic situation. She told media outlet CT Insider that she thought when she gave up her son, he would be in a better place, not, quote, be with a bunch of monsters. And she's not the only biological family member of MV1 to come forward since this story broke. The biological mom has a daughter who's now 35, making her MV1's half-sister. She says that she spent years searching for her half-brother, especially when he turned 18, on social media and through court records, but couldn't find him. She told the Connecticut Post that she remembers meeting him when he was 3 years old, but then never again. She told WFSB TV that she only lived 12 miles away from the home where her half-brother was allegedly being held captive. She told the outlet, quote, we just need him to know he's got people. We love him and we want him. He shouldn't have been thrown away like garbage, end quote. She also told WFSB that it wasn't just Sullivan and MV1 in the house, that there were 2 stepsisters who were also there and were loved and cared for. Quote, I want to see them all fried. They deserve solitary confinement for the rest of their lives. Drink out of the toilet, that half-sister told WFSB. It is unclear at the time of this recording if more arrests will be made in this case. We know that MV1's father died in January 2024. Police say he was confined to a wheelchair. Police have yet to detail the abuse that they believe Craig Sullivan was responsible for, but Kimberly Sullivan's attorney is now pointing the blame to him as she is facing charges. Here's what he said in a news conference to WVIT TV.
The biological father? Well, I mean, he was the biological father. He's the one that dictated how his son would be raised. We think as the evidence comes out, you will see that she's not the villain she's being made out to be. Absolutely not.
And here's Kimberly Sullivan appearing in court. She faces charges including assault in the first degree, kidnapping in the second degree, and unlawful restraint in the first degree. She posted a $300,000 bond and is out awaiting the next steps in her case. There are also questions for the Connecticut Department of Children and Families, who visited MV1's house twice in 2004 after he was pulled out of school. The state didn't believe that anything was wrong at the time, even though those in his former school in Waterbury raised concerns. In fact, MV1's elementary school principal told WVIT, quote, everyone really was concerned with this child since he was 5 years old. You knew something was wrong. It was grossly wrong. And, quote, "We knew it. We reported it. Not a damn thing was done. That's the tragedy of this whole thing." Now, it's unclear what the files say about what DCF saw when they went to MV1's house in 2004, because in Connecticut, when a case is considered unfounded, the records are erased after 5 years. Joining us now, crime victims advocate Elizabeth Parker. Thank you for being here. This is a tough story. And one thing that has just stood out to me is so many of the people involved, the police officers, the police chief in Waterbury. We've just heard so many people say, I've never seen something like this before. These allegations are so bad. But how common are these cases where, maybe not to this extent, but you're seeing this type of neglect that can be, almost brushed under the rug or fall through the cracks, whatever metaphor you want to use?
Well, the details in this particular case are so disturbing. I mean, you can tell the community is just in shock that a horror like this can persist for so long without any intervention. But you can see that they fell through the cracks. I mean, this family, it looks like back in 2005, the Division of Children and Families, they were contacted by the school because you have a 10 or 11-year-old child that's digging through the garbage. That's clearly a sign of neglect, clearly a sign of abuse right there. Teachers saw it. They reported it. DCF went out and everything appeared to be normal at the home. And then from what it seems from the reports, that the family then moved away. They complained about the investigation and then they just kept him hidden. And from that point on, we don't learn anything about the victim. You have the biological sister saying she was searching for him. You have his uncle giving reports that he was searching for him. This is just a situation where they made him disappear and nobody seemed to care. Nobody seemed to know. Nobody seemed to have real tabs on this particular victim. And it's horrific. It's shocking that this could happen. And it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, and now we're hearing from some of the members of his biological family, because the fact it was his stepmom raised so many questions when this story first came out. Before getting to his family, the DCF point, and you have a principal who talked to media saying when he was 5 years old, they noticed something was wrong. And then you have the school that when he was older, like 12 years old, that there were these signs he was like eating out of the garbage. Like, what bar does need to be met to be considered neglect? Like, what could, and we don't know, because the 5 years later in Connecticut, after something's found considered unfounded, the reports don't exist anymore. But what could they have seen inside the house that made them think that everything was okay?
These incidents are really difficult because typically you have a child that DCF will talk to and they're terrified. They're scared. They know that they live in that home and they're under the control of their abuser. This is just a different form of domestic violence. Child neglect, child abuse. This is domestic violence. And so it's hard because oftentimes, without doing a detailed search of the home, having cameras inside the home, seeing how they're really living, by all stretches, by all appearances, at face value, it may seem like this is a normal home and he's thriving. But we do know that those warning signs that the teachers saw, that the principal saw, of him digging through the garbage, stealing food, being hungry on a daily basis, those were huge telltale signs. And I do think that we have made many strides since 2005 to have better databases, to have more reporting. There is more awareness. A child isn't going to be able to be missing from the school system without there being tabs anymore in this day and age. So I think a lot has been done with cases like this, but for this to have gone on for 20 years is just so shocking.
It really is. And you think that potentially there's a social worker somewhere right now who just in the past couple of weeks has realized, oh wait, that house that I went to so many years ago, something I could have done. I mean, if that person exists and is still out there, you just think about what they're thinking about in this. I know so many people say, how could this happen? I look at the suspect in this case, Kimberly Sullivan, and according to her defense attorney, she's shocked. She can't believe that she would be accused of something like this, though her stepson weighs less than 70 pounds. But in these cases of neglect, What are some of the characteristics that you typically see of the person who gets charged and accused of being the abuser?
One thing that's interesting is that typically in these cases we see step parents are more prevalent to be the abusers of their stepchildren than biological parents of biological children. Here we have someone that she was pretty bold and pretty brazen. I was very surprised by the defense attorneys coming out and being so bold about their defense that I think we'll get to. But here, I think the medical evidence is going to be so crucial. The state will be able to prove that there's no other explanation for the starvation as to why he was so emaciated. This was prolonged abuse. This was severe neglect. This was inhumane treatment. I mean, he said when he would eat the very little food that he was given on a daily basis, his teeth would literally disintegrate and fall out. He didn't bathe for years. But, you have the perpetrator, the abuser here, Kimberly Sullivan, on a daily basis was putting fear inside this victim. And we have to remember that, going back to the fact that food was restricted in him for so very long, the brain development, he's still childlike. He still is stuck in that time period of when he was a child in elementary school. He had no schooling. He had no access to the outside world. He's stuck there. And his body was basically shutting down on him, but keeping him alive. And it's amazing what the human body, can do. It's remarkable. But when you don't take in enough calories, your brain recognizes it's a famine situation and kind of kicks into gear to keep you alive. Your metabolism slows down. The amount of energy you need to sustain your needs is very slow. So you can maintain that very low body weight for a long time on very few calories a day. But it has a significant impact on the brain. Underdevelopment, anxiety, paranoia, things like that. So, I think in the arrest report, it said his BMI was 11. Which is half of what it should have been. And anything, I think they said under 16 is starvation and under 13 is life-threatening. So he's in the category below life-threatening. So for the defense attorneys to say she was providing him food and shelter and taking great care of him, I think the evidence would suggest otherwise.
Yeah, take us in, because I do want to talk a little bit about what her defense could look like, because the victim in this case is going to be such a key piece of evidence. You look at someone and you say that they're 70 pounds, and it's just such a shocking number. But before the specific defense, take us into the world of criminal defense, where if you're representing this woman and then you have to go out in front of cameras and then try and make this argument, what is your goal? What is the goal of accomplishing saying that she's shocked and she can't believe that this was going to happen when, in reality, I think anybody who's heard this story, read the police report, or just hears that number 70 pounds would just say that that's not true.
Typically you keep it very general when you start into a case and into a criminal defense case, and you don't have all of the evidence, or the evidence such as this is overwhelming at first blush. Typically you keep it very general. We're looking forward to our day in court, and Miss Sullivan would look forward to being able to defend herself from these charges. Typically that's what you say. But here, they came out of the gate saying, she's just blown away by these accusations, and, that they're not true. And she provided him food and shelter and care. Let's just look at the body camera footage, Chris. She's standing on the front porch. She's holding her dog, who she clearly cares very much about, to protect the dog from the fire. But when asked, is anyone else in the house, she says her stepson. And then I want to point out to you, when she is arrested and she's placed in handcuffs, and we see that photograph that's on the front page of many of the newspapers, and she's being escorted in handcuffs by 2 police officers. Look at her nails. Her nails are done. Her makeup's done. She's very put together. She's got on a nice outfit. She's got jewelry. She's got highlights. So if she's able to take care of him and keep the lights on, the electricity, pay for the house, pay for the food, pay for the way that she looks, she had to be working. And we know from some of the reports there are people that worked with her that have expressed their regret and expressed their feelings about the case. So we know she's working, she's leaving the house. So let's try to, as the defense, explain around that how he didn't escape, how he wasn't able to for years and years and years when she's working escape unless he's locked up, because he thought his only choice was to set the house on fire, put himself in danger, because that's the only way somebody could come in to save him. He didn't see there as any way for him to escape. So I think that's significant insight into the daily torture that he underwent in this home by her.
Yeah, and of course, innocent until proven guilty. She'll have her day in court as this goes on, and we'll see what her argument is. The defense appears to be trying to plant a lot on her husband who passed away more than a year ago. He is the biological father of male victim one. So when we hear of the quotes that the biological mom was given, she decides to give up custody at a very young age. And then her ex-husband ends up having custody of male victim one, who then was married to Kimberly Sullivan. How effective can the defense be in that for the majority of, they'll paint Craig Sullivan as this terrible person, I'm sure. And if that's the case, how effective can that defense be that he was really the ringleader of all of this and really set everything into motion?
Assuming that's true, he died in January of 2024. So how do we explain what happened from that day forward? But she's living in that house, allowing, if he's the one that, Mr. Sullivan is the one that was the architect behind all of this, which the victim does not seem to agree or abide by that story. I think he says his dad did let him out, and his dad never locked him in the room. But assuming that to be true, their defense to be true, she's a co-defendant. She's a co-conspirator. She's just as guilty as Mr. Sullivan is for all of this. And then everything that transpired in that time period after he passed away, got sick, was in a wheelchair, whatever the case may be, that's all going to be on her. She can't get around that. So I don't know that that's necessarily the smartest defense. It may be the only thing that they're left with at this particular point.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, because the other, just thinking of what her defense could be, you heard that, we were talking, the defense attorney said something along the lines of like, he was fed, and he wasn't, he was allowed out at certain points. Why didn't he go out and, alert the public and get the help that he needed? And I don't know if in court you would want to get into a he said, she said with someone who's clearly been through so much, physical issues. But how would you go about that defense if that's what you wanted to paint it as, is there wasn't any physical abuse, there wasn't sexual abuse, but he was just being kept in this room?
I think the way that you go down that path is that he was restricting on his own. He wasn't, he was provided the food, he wasn't eating it, and then, or he had some sort of medical condition that was preventing him from gaining weight. And then, he's paranoid because he's underweight, and that's causing anxiety, paranoia. He's made this all up. None of this is true. I think there's, other than his weight and his medical condition, there's not, from what we see in the arrest report, any other corroborating evidence outside of a lock being on the door, right. Him being unkempt, his teeth being rotten, things like that. But at this point, he's 32 years old. So is he just not caring for himself? Anything over the age of 18, is she responsible for? I think those are questions that will all remain to be seen.
Yeah, it could be a really tough argument to make, though. I think if that's your case going to court, it could be tough. $300,000 bond, she's able to make that, so she's walking free right now ahead of her court appearances. She's still facing some very significant charges. There's an argument about the role of what bail should be. Is that a punishment, or should it have been higher based on just the horrific nature of the condition that the victim allegedly was in when police found him. What do you make of that?
You know, each state handles bail or bond a little bit differently, but really it's to ensure that the person returns back to court. It's not meant to punish because, as you did say, they are innocent until proven guilty. I would have liked to see her on house arrest, have a little taste of her own medicine if she was going to be let out, at least have her confined to her house. But I guess the judge didn't see the wisdom in that. But well, hopefully she's going to show up back in court. You know, as her lawyer said, she's looking forward to defending herself. So I think that'll be an interesting defense to see where they take this. Yeah,
and the $300,000 amount, just for people who may not follow the ins and outs of court every single day, is that cash that she's posting? Does that mean she has $300,000 that she then puts forward? Like what could she have had that allowed her to make that amount? Because that is still a pretty significant amount to put up, which also would potentially speak to the amount of money that she did have, along with clearly what she was wearing when she was arrested.
Well, bond can be posted in a number of different ways. First of all, you could put the whole amount up in cash, and you get that back when the case is over. You can also post with a bondsman, which typically they would only take 10% of what the $300,000 would be. Sometimes you can put up collateral. Maybe you can sign, over the deed to your house, a car. It just depends on, what assets that you have that the bondsman is willing to take. But typically it's 10% of the dollar amount.
And you're a crime victims advocate. This case, I think of this male victim one and just the story he told, and for as horrific it was, there's just the moment that he said, I just think of the determination of to the lighter that he got from a year earlier, with hand sanitizer that he learned is flammable. He had printer paper. It gives you goosebumps thinking of, like, he just laid on the ground when the smoke was surrounding him because he knew firefighters were going to be the ones that have to take him out. I mean, that is it's a powerful affidavit to read through. What does his future look like, knowing that he has a 4th grade education reportedly, and he weighs, physically he's in such difficult shape as well?
Well, I think there's we're in kind of a dangerous time period because medically his body has to learn how to adjust to eating and food and calories and all of that. And that can be a dangerous time for his organs to adjust to this new normal of caloric intake and a different type of food than what sandwiches for 20 something years, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So I think he is very resilient. It seems like, from what I read in the affidavit, that he had taught himself. He did have some books. He read through a dictionary. He would teach himself. He's very, very, very self-taught, smart enough to figure out that the hand sanitizer would be a good accelerant that he could use, smart enough to figure out that he couldn't leave, but that if somebody came in and saved him, and the only way that he figured would be to set fire to the house. So I think he does have a bright future. It seems like the community has really rallied against him, for him, against her, and in support of him. And I think I read somewhere that over $100,000 has been raised for his benefit. So he's going to need significant counseling because he's got severe case of PTSD. I don't know how he ever is going to be able to live a normal life, but it's certainly going to be better than what he's been living for the past 20 years. And I praise him and just hope that he remains strong and healthy and can recover from this.
Yeah, no, well put. It's just such a shocking story. We'll see how it plays out. She is due in court next week, so that'll be the next step in the legal proceedings surrounding what was discovered at this house in Connecticut. Elizabeth Parker, always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being here.
Chris. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Kimberly Sullivan is due back in court on March 26th. As for a GoFundMe page that the city of Waterbury has put out to raise money for MV1, it's now at more than $128,000. For On the Case, presented by Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.